start. Okay, awesome. So we're recording. Um,
Cool.
I think a great place for us to start, I've been itching to ask you this question, I must be honest, is the process of achieving personal authority in your life and in the workplace. So authority, having a
Yeah.
say over how things go.
Yeah.
What would you say is the key thing to having authority over yourself and then eventually having authority over others and how things go?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. So I would say authority starts with action, bro. Um, I think action leads the way to how people respond to you, right? It's one thing to have authority but non-action.
Mm,
People don't listen to you, so your authority actually becomes null and void. So I'll start off with obviously authority in my personal space. So generally, how I try to achieve authority in my personal space is by in the few moments that I get to engage with those around me, I'm very active and present in those moments, in the
mm,
sense that I express a high level of gratitude, positivity, and above all, happiness, right? It's not always perfect. I get my times where I go on my phone and those type of things,
mm,
but like I am actively there and actively trying to put in the energy that will allow for me to have authority over, my personal time with the person. In the workspace, I was very different because your attitude doesn't get you always where you want to go. I
mm,
focus on output, and I think the nice thing about the workplace is that it's an organization. So it's a group of people working together. And I think if you can be the one to do stuff, do it first, do it best, do it correctly every time, consistently, regardless of how you feel, then you're able to command authority over those who, number one, might be keeping you back, or number two, the ones who are struggling and need your assistance. And in those two situations, if you are a leader or someone who cares about the overall task, you then get the opportunity to help people.
mm,
And when you help people, you gain natural authority over them because they respect you and they look up to you. And number two, you also are able to deliver on results outside of your personal KPIs. So that comes in terms of fostering a culture of doing things properly, fostering a culture of helping others, and fostering a culture of being positive in terms of how you interact and how you achieve tasks. So for me, it's all in the doing. I think talking is one thing, but you got to be able to walk the talk. And I think walk the talk is actually done perfectly, right? In order to talk the talk, you must first walk it.
yeah.
Talking is one thing, but if you don't walk it, then it's not on board. You actually have no authority. And in your side, bro, how do you navigate those two? What do you do to get those two right?
I like what you said there about action. And, I was thinking about this last night, whilst I was designing the questions that I wanted to ask you for this. And I thought to myself, authority stems from responsibility. And
Yeah,
the more responsibility you can take, the more authority you will get, right?
yeah,
And a great way of looking at this is like, think about the progression as a child into an adult. As a kid, you don't even have authority over yourself
yeah,
because you're not responsible for yourself. Your
yeah,
parents are responsible for you, and that's why they have authority over you. But
yeah,
once you step into adulthood and you begin to engage that process of standing on your own 2 feet and breaking away from your parents, their authority over you, I mean, I don't want to say it diminishes, but you start to take over because you're assuming responsibility. And
for
in the
sure.
workplace, I think it's the same thing. So you come in, you have a role, and you are responsible for that role. So if you just stick to the work that you're assigned to, then your responsibility is there and your authority stays there. But if you
Yeah,
start to do more than what's expected of you and you do it well, like you say, action,
yeah,
your authority expands with that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I would say is is the key factor for me is assuming responsibility.
So well said. And I mean, I like how you mentioned that, right? That the size of your authority depends on what you do, how much you do, right? And like that's why I mentioned the point around if you do your tasks fast and well, you've done your responsibility. But if you see someone else struggling and you go
Yeah.
and help them, then you have some sort of subconscious authority over them in that moment. And the reality is that that authority naturally comes back to you and almost becomes yours every time you need to engage with that person because you've helped them before. And think of it like this: if you're doing something and you're struggling, and your equal tends to help you a lot in that task,
Yeah. It's
you,
gonna
you
have to
respect them, right? And to a certain degree, they have authority over you when it comes to that task in particular,
right.
um, because they can do it better. And in that phase, they're your teacher, they're your parent, you know, until you are at the point where you are the equal in that task and can no longer do without their supervision or authority in that task.
So the cool thing there, it's like if we could distill it into two phrases or two words, it's responsibility and credibility.
Yeah,
Because everything you said there is like doing what you say you're going to do and doing it well gives you credibility. So,
100%.
yeah,
100%.
that's great. I like that. Well
Yeah.
answered.
Good question.
Thanks, man. Okay, I have another question, and then we can jump onto the two that you shared as well
Yeah.
on navigating the challenge of procrastination. Now, I think this is something that every human being faces at some point in their lives. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a very human, like biological function of trying to push off doing something that's uncomfortable and that you're not
Yeah.
sure what you're doing.
Yeah.
What is your experience with procrastination? How often do you find yourself procrastinating? And when you do, how do you navigate it?
Yeah. I like how you mentioned that everyone deals with it, right? And I think when I look at the animal kingdom, to be quite honest with you, I think humans are the only ones who procrastinate. And I think procrastination comes with consciousness
Mm,
to a certain degree, right? Because I think to procrastinate, you have to be conscious of the fact that you need to do something, but you also are conscious of the fact that you may not be in the mood
mm,
to do that task. So, in my personal life, how I try to overcome procrastination is by realizing that, if I look at life, everything is flow, everything is energy, everything is frequency. And if I am from the earth and at one with the universe, then I should have it within my, genetic DNA to also be at motion all the time for the things that I want to achieve. I'm not saying I don't rest, I do rest, but when it comes to doing tasks, I always try to avoid stillness because stillness is dangerous, right? Stillness is procrastination. Another thing that I also do to like avoid procrastination is I always try to face fear. So I think a lot of procrastination is driven by the fear of failure
mm,
or the fear of not being able to execute properly. And how I obviously look through those lenses by accepting the fact that I may not get this right, and I am willing to be corrected, um, or even humiliated, if I get this wrong. So those are the two things I use to kind of get through procrastination, understanding that I'm part of the universe and I'm capable of staying in flow all the time. And number two, not being scared to fail, because I think at the end of the day, not achieving something a lot makes us, detour or start later or not approach it
mm,
directly.
mm.
What about yourself? How do you tackle procrastination?
Look, something that I want to highlight in your answer there was distinguishing procrastination from rest. And I think a great way to differentiate the two is when you rest, you are choosing to rest. But when you procrastinate, you're kind of deceiving yourself.
Yeah,
You're not
yeah,
acknowledging that that's what you're doing, or you're
yeah,
you're coming up with reasons not to do something instead of just saying, I'm tired, I'm gonna rest, and then I'm gonna do what I need to do.
yeah,
Yeah, I think what you said there about fear is a big one. How I navigate procrastination is one, I try and be honest with myself. I'm present. So when I am procrastinating, I try and catch it and acknowledge to myself that I am doing that.
mm,
And then the second thing is when I'm aware of it, I try and break whatever I'm doing into the most ridiculously small chunks possible so that
Yeah.
I make the game easy to win, you know.
Yeah.
I turn it
Yeah.
into a game where I'm like, okay, if I really don't want to do this thing, like let's say the dishes as a stupid example, I'll say, okay, let's just wash one mug, just one. And when you do that, you can chill. You've won the game. And more
For
often
sure.
than not, once I do one, I'm like, well, I have all of this water here. I might as well do some more. And then I'm like,
100%.
okay, let's put some music on, make this more fun. And then by
Yeah.
the time I look up, I've tricked myself into doing the task, you know.
Sure. For
And
sure. For sure.
I find it to be very useful.
And I like that, right? Because there you've embodied the consciousness that I was speaking about earlier on, right? Like if you look at any animal, like when it's time to wake up, the birds wake up at the same time every day.
Yeah.
When it's time to hunt or seek food, they do it at the same time every day. They do it when they need to do it. They respond to their basic needs like instantaneously.
Yeah.
They respond to anything that's going to progress them, like in a split second. And like with us, the consciousness of doing the task sometimes is the problem.
Mm,
Because you need to do it, but if you don't have to do it, you don't automatically respond to it. And you have to have this conversation with yourself to make the decision. And I think that's where it speaks about in the Bible, right? God says humans are the only ones who have the ability to make choice, free will.
right.
And I think it's derived also from that. The fact that you have a choice fuels the chances of procrastination.
Yeah, it's true.
Terrible.
We're not robots where you can press a remote and say, do this, do that, do this, do that. We actually
Not
have to
instinctive.
choose it. Yeah, we must choose it every time, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
Something I'll add to that, which I think also helps, is
yeah,
there's this principle that we talk about all the time, right? Of seek first to understand, then to be
yeah,
understood. I've actually found that this can apply to your own experience of life, where I say, often procrastination is where you imagine that a task's going to be worse than it actually is. So sometimes it's useful to approach a task with curiosity, where you say, I'm not going to judge this experience before it happens. I'm just going to let it happen as it does.
yeah, yeah,
So let me just start doing this thing and see how it feels instead of using my imagination to say, oh, this is going to be terrible and I don't want to do it and go
yeah,
into that spiral, which is basically what anxiety is. Anxiety,
100%.
just imagine negative imagination.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's like almost like, they say like we all live in the same physical space, but our worlds are determined by what we think in our imagination. So we actually don't live in the same world. We live in the world that we preconceive in our minds, right?
Well, that ties in beautifully to your point that you wanted to discuss about,
Yeah,
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 reality. So I'm going to let you ask that one.
yeah. So, I mean, I just want to understand from you. I think everyone obviously looks at this differently, but I just want to know from you, how you view the understanding between true reality and physical reality, right? As we've mentioned, it like to us, it looks like one physical reality, but by definition, it's not. So, how do you define the two, and how do you distinguish between what's really real when being in your mind and seeing reality?
Such a cool concept to talk about. And I think there's so many layers to it. If I'm going to steal an example from the book that I was reading last night, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And
Yeah,
in the book, he talks about the concept of paradigms, right? Which is the lens through which you view the world. And that speaks to this very important distinction, where the example that he uses is true reality is the landscape, right? Perception, which is your personal reality, is the map of the landscape. And so what he says is if you're driving in Chicago, but you're using a map of Los Angeles, you're going to get lost
yeah.
because you think you're driving in one place, but you're actually looking at something else. And that's what I would say is the distinction between true reality and your physical reality. There is
Wow.
a real world out there, and Basically, the journey of getting wisdom is you trying to peel back the layers so that you can see that real world and see how things actually works.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's such a fascinating concept that, and I'm sure you can speak to your own life's experiences about this, but I've had so many experiences in my life where I thought something was something, and then I learned that it wasn't that way at all. And it
Yeah, for
changed my
sure.
whole experience of life. And
100%.
the last thing I'll say on it is it's like your world is only as big as your experience of it. We know that the
Yeah.
world is big, we know that the universe is big, but if you live in the same room, you go to the same place all the time, that is your world, and your world is very small,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, wow, yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but please
Yeah, for sure.
tell me
For
your
sure. For
take
sure.
on
I must say, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? I think it's very important to obviously distinguish the two, but it's also very important to understand that like our five senses are very limited.
it. Mm,
And if you just rely on your five senses, then you're not using the right map,
yeah,
you know? And I think that's where things like your imagination come into play, spirituality come into play, uh, your instinct and your gut come into play. All these are senses that help for you to understand the physical world a little bit better.
yeah,
You know, I also think friends and family also work as guides or extended versions of your senses. You know, your community helps you also understand the world better. And I think it's when you look at reality in that full regard that you understand that yes, they are different, but they're also connected.
yes,
You know, and like I like the example that you used about the map, you know, like a very good, you know, example of like misalignment between what is in your mind and what is in reality is your map being your brain or your how you perceive things and reality not being in tune with what you're perceiving,
absolutely.
you know. And I think the best way to do it is the other way around, you know, to really understand that what is in the physical space will transcend into spiritual, the imaginative form
Yes,
if you follow the right map and if you think the right way and if you use all your senses correctly to understand that what you are perceiving at this point in time you're experiencing but it is actually not what you think it is. And I like what you said, there are many times you've been in situations where you realize that things were not as you thought they were,
yes,
you know. And I
yes,
think that comes from heightened senses. And I think a lot of us, and I think it's natural, learn the hard way, where you rely on the limited senses that you have or your experience, where you make a judgment based on your past, and then you get burnt,
yes,
right? So I think a combination of understanding reality also comes from bad experiences, failures, etc., etc.,
yeah.
in the times where there was misalignment between your senses and what's actually happening in the physical world.
Well said. And you know what I would add to that is a lot of it is judgment that leads us astray. You know,
Yeah,
in mindfulness, a lot of the times in practice, they talk about witness and observe
yeah,
without judgment. Stop putting a label on something because
yeah,
you want to project your experiences onto this moment. So,
yeah,
like a big thing is you don't even know a person. You meet them, and within 5 minutes, you think you've summed them up like you've known them
yeah.
their whole lives.
100%,
That is
100%.
you projecting your life onto that individual. It's got
Yeah,
nothing to do with them. And
yeah,
the more you get to know them, the more you realize how false your premises were. And like, when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're not listening, they're just
yeah,
surface level listening. They don't get what you're trying to say at all. They're just projecting their experience onto your words and they
yeah,
misinterpret entirely.
100%, 100%. And I like how you said that, right? Like, there's a very interesting experiment that I read about the other day where um one professor said three sentences the same way and asked the audience what they heard. And I think there was an even split between uh the differences in what they heard. So not everyone heard the same thing,
Yeah.
you know. They were all students of the same subjects. They were
Same
all
reality,
same
different
reality, same
perception.
everything. But what they derived from what he said was completely different.
That's
You know,
amazing.
and I think that, yeah, I think that goes to also like levels of understanding, right?
Yeah.
If your level of understanding or your level of listening and being present to be able to observe and understand is different from someone else, then you experience a different reality and you experience the person differently. So yeah, it's a very complex topic, you know, and I
Mm.
think that's why you connect with other people and you don't connect with other people. I think it's just got to do with, you know, understanding the two different spheres of reality there. And unfortunately, we will always be at different levels. And if you connect with people, that means to some degree you are in the same sphere when it comes
Mm.
to um the understanding of the two.
Yeah. But you know, it's interesting. I think no person can ever see reality exactly the same way as you can,
Yeah,
because no one's life is the same. So
yeah,
your lenses will never quite be the same. You can align, but they'll never quite be the same. You know, I
yeah,
mean, two
yeah,
siblings can come from the same household,
yeah,
twins can
yeah,
come from the same
yeah,
household, but have a different perception of reality, you know.
for sure, for sure, for
Because
sure,
there's
for
just
sure.
so much of life that goes unshared with other people. So many things
Yeah,
that you see and think by yourself that you'll never
yeah,
get to share with anybody, you know?
yeah. And that's the nice thing about being human. We're also different, right?
Yeah.
All completely different. And I think that's where things like DNA and your chromosomes and all these things come into play, right?
Hmm.
Everyone is unique in their own way. And I think those who become masters of others firstly become masters of themselves. And you think if you can master yourself very well, you know,
Yes.
you see a little bit of yourself in everybody.
True. That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, very
The
true.
minute you master yourself, you've mastered everyone you can look at their eyes into.
Well, I've heard a cool quote where someone said, if you admire somebody else, it's because you see something of yourself in them that they've
Yeah.
cultivated, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I agree with that. I speak to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
what was I going to ask you now that tied into this? Oh, um, how do you think a person needs to go about aligning their personal reality with real reality, like true reality?
Yeah.
What's your process been of that? And how successful do you think you've become with that?
Sure. So mine might be not the conventional way, but for me, like I've just learned to focus on the doing. Like
Okay.
do good, do no harm, do what you're supposed to do, uh, and then the universe will sort itself out, right? So I follow the cosmic laws of the universe.
Hmm.
Because I believe for every action there is a reaction.
Yeah.
So I just focus on my actions. Yes, your actions don't always give you the result you want in the short term. Yes, the universe throws curveballs your way, but I also understand that there's seasons in life. So I think for me, the alignment of the two has just been understanding that I need to go through whatever the universe throws my way with great faith and understanding that my efforts will bring me what I want. This
Mm.
goes into my work life, into my personal life, into my relationships, and into how I treat myself and my body. So yeah, it's just I just use faith to be honest, and I try control my karmic energy by doing no wrong and just focusing on following the laws of the universe. And how about yourself? How do you align those?
I think I think we're the same. I'm gonna say it a bit differently, but I would say experimenting, uh, in the sense of saying, okay, if I do this, what happens? Okay, that happens. Okay, now I know
Yeah,
that happens. So let me
yeah,
do that or let me do that.
yeah,
Like you say, actions. I think the only way to really see what is going to happen is if you do that, if you have the
yeah,
action.
yeah, yeah,
Some honorable mentions I'd throw in there is writing. Writing for me has been a very great tool for seeing things clearly. Because
yeah,
often when you write it and you put it on paper, you're removing yourself from the experience, and you can just
mm,
observe it as a bystander would. which takes a lot of
mm,
the emotional charge out of it. So, like when I was younger and I found myself having interpersonal conflict with people, often I would write stuff down and then afterwards I look at it and I'm like, wow, I'm so wrong.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
the
yeah.
problem.
The
Yeah.
objectivity of writing is amazing, eh?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
then
for
you're like,
sure, for
oh
sure.
shit, okay, now I have to go apologize because I know I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
and speaking to people also helps. So this process of saying something, listening to this response, and hearing your input, and then digesting that, it
yeah,
slowly refines your perspective on the world, you know?
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
really cool because
yeah.
you can leverage someone else's experience. And so
100%.
you almost like timesing your process by two, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I like how you mentioned that, right? I think the reality here is that because I think the world has gotten closer and you don't have to have a relationship with someone to learn from their mistakes. Another good way to align the two is you don't always have to test your own action, but just observe someone else's actions to see what the results were,
Yes.
and through that you become wiser. Like I
Yes.
always say, we become great by standing on the shoulders of others, right?
Well said.
Um, so you can extend your lens just by, you know, uh, observing and trying to gain wisdom from those who came before you and those who are with you.
It's hard though.
Cool.
It's
It
hard.
is. It
To
is.
learn
I
from
think,
other people's mistakes instead of repeating them yourself is a challenge.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
often the only thing that stops us from doing a mistake is the pain that you get from it.
yeah.
And someone else's pain and your pain is not the same.
100%. The threshold is different, right?
Exactly. And you
Yeah,
don't know
for
what their
sure.
experience was like. Like you might
Yeah,
have seen the results, but like you can't feel their pain. You can try and
yeah,
empathize.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. I think that's a good ending point to my next question that I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
Quite broad, but I just wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the importance of wisdom when applying intelligence. Do you think it's critical, or do you think intelligence alone is enough to make a lot of the decisions in life?
No, I think wisdom trumps intelligence in my opinion. I don't know. In my personal experience, often intelligence can be arrogant and wisdom is humility, you know. Those two go very well together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to find the words for it, but when I was younger, I really worshipped intellect. I always thought that
Yeah.
was the best trait for a person to have. But I've now grown in my regard for wisdom. So if I was to distinguish the two, I feel like intelligence is your your aptitude for understanding complex things.
Well
Okay.
said.
Wisdom is your ability to recognize reality and to make good decisions based off of that recognition.
Hmm.
So both are very important, but if I had to choose between one or the other, I would take wisdom.
Yeah, for
What
sure.
about you?
For sure.
What's your thoughts on it?
I must say I agree. I think you can get away with more in life if you apply wisdom
Hmm.
over intelligence. And I think intelligence is very specific. Like
Yes.
you said, it's the ability to have a heightened understanding of a complex task, all right, or a complex problem. But
Yes.
the reality is that in order to solve that complex problem, your intelligence alone is not enough.
Yes.
Because at some point in the problem solving, you will need to apply wisdom. And like we mentioned, wisdom is the ability to make wise and clear, game-changing decisions.
Yes.
So, in a nutshell, I think intelligence is limited. I think intelligence has an end, you
Yes.
know? Like, I mean, if you look at like, I'm not the best mathematician or whatever, but if you look at like maths or maybe even science to an extent, like every experiment comes to an end. You can figure out something till there's nothing more to figure out, you know? Um, but with wisdom, it's different. You know, you can never fully figure out wisdom. The wisdom of the world is infinite,
100%.
and it can serve you in ways that intelligence cannot. So,
Well
yeah, I
said.
think Yeah, I think wisdom is a superpower, and I think wisdom is what's allowed for some of the greatest people in the world to become great. Because it's also a connection between like what we call the universal storehouse of intelligence. So like the core of your spirit, where we come from and where we're going after. I think wisdom is the ability to tap into that. And that feels also from things like your gut feeling, your intuition, etc, etc. So yeah, I think wisdom is extremely powerful, and it can transcend way beyond um what intelligence can.
So would you would say in this situation is intelligence is local, wisdom is global. Intelligence
Yep.
is specific, wisdom is pervasive. It
Yeah. What
applies
I would
across-
say is what I would say is intelligence is earthly
Yeah,
and wisdom is universal. It's intergalactic. I must say that.
I
You
agree with
know,
that. I,
yeah. Like if you have
I
wisdom, I can dump you in China where you speak no English and you'll navigate it. I
yeah,
can I can dump you into anywhere in the world, in any situation, to any type of person, and you'll be able to navigate it. But if I give you intelligence, if where I've dumped you has got nothing to do with your intelligence, you're doomed.
well
Yeah. I
said.
don't know. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
No, I agree. Um, it speaks very well. I know I keep referencing this book, but it's so powerful. He talks about primary and secondary traits. Primary traits are principles. Secondary traits are rules. Rules are situation specific. Principles are pervasive. The man
Yeah.
who knows principles can make his own rules, but the person who only knows the rules can't make up the principles.
Oh,
And I
wow.
think wisdom and intelligence are kind of similar in their relationship to each other.
Yeah.
Through the
Yeah.
platform of wisdom, you can find the specific intelligence that needs to be applied. I'm
Yeah.
not saying you can be a genius and just do all this math and shit like that, but I'm just saying there's so many different, like, wisdom is the tree, intelligence are the branches,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. 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 And I like how you said that, right? I think wisdom is, and I think if you use the tree, like you said, wisdom is what is it? Is the bulk, the middle part of the tree.
Yeah, the trunk.
That's with the trunk, and then the branches are the intelligence. And like I said, as long as the trunk is there,
Yes.
the branches will always grow. So I think it's a very important, cool part of life, and I think it's something that anyone living should pursue. It makes you a
Yeah.
better person. I think it also like uh gives you a better understanding of the world and allows for you to connect with people better. Because I think with wisdom also comes humility.
Yeah.
And I think your wisdom increases even more when you become humble, because then you're able to take in and observe.
Yeah.
Intelligence is like a barrier. Intelligence is very uh close-minded to an extent because, like you said, you're following a set of rules and there's no creativity behind
Yeah.
behind the law of intelligence.
I would also look at it like kind of like the relationship between talent and work ethic. You know, I would put wisdom and work ethic in the same box in the sense that you can choose it, whereas talent and intellect, there is a base level that is not really up to you.
Yeah,
We're not all born with the same physical and mental capabilities, and intelligence and talent are closely linked to that. But the
yeah,
beauty of work ethic and wisdom is it's a choice.
yeah,
It's limitless how much you
yeah,
choose to cultivate it.
yeah, yeah. And I think ultimately that's what sets us apart. That's what differentiates people.
Mm,
Wisdom.
mm,
I mean, beyond being able to make decisions, wisdom is also the ability to navigate through the world in a harmonious way, you know,
mm, mm.
in perfect harmony with everyone around you, and in such a way that you uplift everyone around you. And if you are below, someone else is willing to lift you up. Uh, so yeah, I think wisdom is one of the superpowers of Earth or the world, and I think it's something that everyone should try to chase.
Who would you say is the wisest person you've ever met
Sure.
that you think about? Tough question. But
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I wouldn't say the wisest person I've ever met is someone that I've met because I believe that I've met like people that I haven't met as an example. I mean, we come from, like I said, one source, so like I believe like I've met like Mahatma Gandhi through his books as an example, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like, one of the wisest people that I could say I've ever met through this like artificial imaginary way of meeting people is number one, Mahatma Gandhi. I think his wisdom was absolutely on another level. And number two, I'd say Napoleon Hill. Those are two people for me that have changed my perception of reality and have also made me understand that, there is a clear distinction between what you experience in your head and what you experience in your body, and that in order to really understand that, you need to be wise and humble.
Very well
Yeah.
said.
And yourself, who would you say is the wisest person you ever met?
I'm gonna,
Tough one, eh?
yeah, I'm gonna follow your example here. It's tough because I feel like people that you meet in your own personal experience have different types of wisdom that obviously is stemming from their personal experiences. If I can use my parents, for example, they both have different strengths in terms of wisdom that they can share from their own lives. And I've learned a lot from them. Um, as far as individuals are concerned, so Stephen Covey, the author of Seven Habits, shouldn't come as a surprise because I literally
Yeah.
talk about him every episode.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
But yeah, it's like my favorite book. Viktor Frankl, who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, incredible. Marcus Aurelius, who wrote
Yeah,
Meditations, incredible. Jesus,
yeah, yeah.
a bit
Well
of a
said.
cheat, but he's definitely up there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. For sure.
And Tony Robbins, he's
Wow.
incredible. So
Nice selection, man.
I just
Nice
threw a whole
selection.
bunch out there, but yeah,
Yeah. And I like that, right? I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just don't think that you need to physically meet someone to know them. And I think that's why we
yes,
have books. That's why we have role models. I think, like I said, we all originate from one source, and if someone leaves a book like this, they've left a piece of themselves. They've left a piece of themselves which you can tap into, right? Obviously, they have a little bit more of a heroic figure in your eyes because you never get to learn their flaws, right? And that's why I think it's also very hard to say the wisest person I've met in my life that I've touched is X. Because I think everyone that you get to meet and feel, you experience some sort of flaw within them, right? So the level of wisdom that you perceive them to formally have goes down.
spot on.
Unlike Jesus or an author or someone that you kind of meet in a book. So
I
so
would say
yeah,
you're up there. You're on the list.
really. Oh, it goes both ways. I try, but like nowadays, the more you get to know someone, the more it goes down, right? Um,
No, it's been the opposite with you. The more
yeah,
I got
yeah.
to know you, the more I realized you were wise.
Oh no, I appreciate it. When I must say same for you as well, especially for your age, it's always mind blowing to see the level of advancements that you managed to achieve, bro. It's like I
Thanks,
said, if you think I'm wise, I don't think I was wise as you at your age. So you
man.
can imagine when you get to my age.
I have the benefit of knowing you a couple of years older. So
Yeah.
you didn't know, you didn't have you, so
Yeah, for sure, for
I have an
sure, for sure.
advantage. But yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, I guess that's a good place to wrap it up. Those are some really nice topics.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's anything else from your end.
No, I think this was a great episode. Very
Yeah.
happy. Longer than I thought it was going to be, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we can talk wisdom, we're growing, right? So who doesn't want to grow? And thank you for your insights and knowledge there.
It was
I'm
a
definitely
pleasure.
gonna make some notes after this.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
everybody. That's us. We'll see you next time.